Ed here with the Digital Digest, and today I wanted to share my full review, the digitally digested segment, for the HP Spectre X360 15T. Now, this is the refresh for 2020. That means we have the new design, the 90% screen-to-body ratio, just like we got with the 13T at the end of 2019. This has been my daily driver. Love this machine, but I have to say, this is even more impressive. Granted, not as portable, and won't fit in some bags that I wish it would, but still, for its size and for its price, this is really hard to beat, even with Tiger Lake around the corner, especially if you need a machine today. Now, with that said, it's also constantly out of stock. So I'll include a link in the description directly to HP with this exact configuration, which I'm about to go over. A little under $1,900 US. You've got a 15.6-inch 4K AMOLED display, gorgeous, in my opinion, the best display I've seen on any laptop to date. Of course, it is touchscreen. This is a 2-in-1. It does not come with a pen. This is my HP Tilt pen that I purchased in conjunction with the 13T. This is what I've used primarily on this machine, and that's also what was used in the inking video that is online. I'll include a link in the description. I may even edit that into this. And overall, the Comet Lake, that is an Intel Comet Lake 6-core i7 processor that's under the hood, is completely competent. It is not a generational leap in the way many would hope. That seems to be what Tiger Lake has to offer, but no word yet on this getting a Tiger Lake refresh, so there's no point in even getting into that discussion. If you need a PC now, especially a 2-in-1 that is a desktop replacement, this is the machine to beat, in my opinion. So that 1075 0H is a solid CPU, but then you've also got the NVIDIA GTX 1650 Ti with Max-Q design, 4 gigs of dedicated GDDR6 RAM, which means you're going to be able to game at 1080p medium settings, pretty much any title. It's not a gaming laptop because that's not a high-end GPU, but for the size of this machine, again, at a little over 4.25 pounds, or a little under, more with the 135-watt brick, really impressive, I have to say. Even though you can find that GPU in smaller machines like the Razer Blade Stealth, I would much rather have it here. Again, 1080p gaming, you are going to be fine. The 2 titles that I predominantly tested were Rust and Call of Duty World War II, which are not similar titles at all, but that gives you a good variation of what it's capable of, and I had no problems keeping solid frame rates with either of those titles. When we talk about the processor and GPU, the other thing you have to think about, of course, is video editing, photo editing. You're not going to have any problems at all between the CPU-GPU combo you have here. Now, in my experience, I have been using this as my workhorse since I got it for review, because that's the way to put it through its paces, right? Not just running benchmarking tests. Those are good, but real-world use is best, in my opinion. And I used Vegas 17 Pro, the suite, and my render times using the GTX were significantly better than the 13T's Iris Plus solution, which of course is an integrated Intel graphic solution, not a dedicated GPU. But that you could have guessed, right? I mean, that's no breaking news. Is it a world of difference? No. But is it critical to people who actually plan on doing video editing on a regular basis? Like if this is going to be your single machine? Absolutely. For me, the 13T is my daily driver, but I have an incredibly powerful desktop. So if I need to do any real heavy lifting, I turn to my desktop. For many of you, this is going to be your only computer, and that's why it is important to have the best of both worlds in a package like this. So gorgeous display, solid processor, solid GPU. We've got 16 gigs of RAM, a 1 terabyte NVMe drive that is an Intel NVMe that is upgradable. The RAM is soldered, for those of you that are wondering. So again, 16 gigs in this configuration, and I recommend that. The brightness on this display is a little over, I think it's like 340, 350 nits, but the color accuracy is excellent, as you would expect from an AMOLED display. And I love that HP gives you their display mode preferences, whether you want the default, web, which is of course sRGB, photo, which is Adobe RGB, DCI P3, movie, or just native. something most manufacturers don't do. It shows that they recognize content creators care about those things, and I specifically do. And I'll be touching on the new 14-inch Spectre that is slated to come out this year, because some of you may be wondering if that may be a better option than this. I'll tell you first and foremost, that's not aimed at being a desktop replacement. To my knowledge, no GPU options, so I don't really see that as a competing model, but more of a complementary one. Also, they shifted to a 3:2 aspect ratio, 3000 by 2000 AMOLED display, which I'm sure is going to also be great, but again, appealing to a different customer that doesn't care necessarily about the benefits of having content consumption with a 16:9 aspect ratio like I do. So anyone who's looking for a taller display, like is offered by machines like the Surface laptop, Surface Book, that's what I feel like it's directly competing with. But again, no GPU option, no 4K resolution. That for me would take it off the table. Not ruling it out. I hope to review it soon and share that machine with all of you as well. We've talked about the processor, we've talked about the GPU, both being competent, the RAM perfectly fine. Let's talk about battery life, heat, keyboard, trackpad, because trackpad, by the way, that's one of the biggest critiques on this machine, that it's just too small. I'm fine with it, but HP's listened, and even on that new 14-inch model that's coming out that I just mentioned, which I feel like is really more of an answer to this machine, even though they're going to still be making the 13T with Tiger Lake. That should be pretty exciting. They have made the trackpad larger, so whenever the refresh for this machine arrives, the trackpad will be bigger, no question about that, but I feel it's perfectly fine. I've had no build quality problems, by the way. That was something that plagued me with the 13T. None here at all with the 2020 15T. So for those of you wondering, will you have a wonky machine with popping, creaking? None of that. And this was the only review unit that HP sent over. I didn't have to communicate and say this one's popping, this one's got this. No, perfect. So that's another reassuring thing, and it should be. I mean, it's an expensive machine, but I do feel you're getting what you pay for. Fingerprint Scanner works as expected. The Windows Hello IR camera feature, I think, is a must-have. I do wish the webcam quality was better. In terms of the keyboard, I love it personally. I like that we've got the numerical pad, but that's to be expected with a machine of this size, even though it's fairly small and light for a desktop replacement-esque machine. Granted, again, the GPU is not, a ultra high-end GPU. It's still one that I believe for most users, for the broadest audience, is going to do the job quite well. In addition to that, as I just stated, the trackpad, touchpad, I'm perfectly happy with. Could it be bigger? Sure, that's why they're making it bigger, but I have no complaints about that. What I do love about the keyboard, same thing besides the actual key travel and chiclet style, are the dedicated mute buttons. So you have a dedicated mute button for the system audio, which gives you an LED indicator, which I would not trade for the world, because it's a pain in the ass to have to go look to see whether things are muted and make sure, but with that light, you don't have to wonder. And then the same applies to the microphone. And privacy these days, that is an important thing. Of course, we also have a kill switch for the webcam, which, as I've mentioned, I wish was better. Same pretty bad webcam that you'll find in the 13T, but that's a product of them making it, shrinking it down to that size to get it into that tiny bezel. And that's a trade-off I'm willing to live with. Would I like to see them improve it? Of course. Another thing I'd like to see them improve, the speakers. The Bang & Olufsen B&O speaker array that's across the entire deck here, it can get loud, but it's mediocre at best. And that seems to be another thing it shares in common with the 13T, is just that, no one can touch that Lenovo 940, C940 audio performance with that sound bar. I wish that it could, because this and the webcam are probably my biggest complaints about this machine. And if those are the biggest complaints, you know how good this machine is. Now, when it comes to inking, it's solid. I mean, my fiance is the artist, not I. For me, I would just be doing note-taking. But to give you an example of what some of that inking looks like, just go ahead and open that up. And you can see a sketch. This was a quick sketch that she did, and I may incorporate the inking video that we put together for the channel, that she did. I shouldn't say we, I just put it on the channel, right? Into this video, or just link you to it. I'll decide in post. But you know, her input on it was that it was good, but she prefers the Tab S7. So that gives you a good idea. And I think this applies to really all two-in-ones, is that it's great to have the versatility of the touchscreen and the pen input. It's great to have the ability to flip the entire display around and work on it in this mode. It's great to have all the different modes, tent mode, all of those things. But, you know, she ran into enough issues with palm rejection, and then just, you know, Sketchbook not being the greatest piece of software to work with. I mean, those are more Windows problems than they are HP problems. That's not something I blame on HP. And that reminds you that if digital art is really what you're after, these machines, none of the two-in-ones are ideal. They're serviceable, but not ideal. That is the takeaway. And if you look for online content, you're going to see there's not a tremendous amount. I mean, it's kind of whack 'em or bust these days. And so while this is integrated and it's a good extra value, I'm not going to tell anyone they should buy it just for this purpose, especially based on her input. As I mentioned, you've got, you know, tent mode. You have, of course, media content consumption like that we were just doing, or drawing, because it can go completely flat. The whole idea is that you have that 365-degree hinge, and you don't have to worry about anything, the screen getting scratched here because we do have bumpers, or the keyboard getting damaged when it's in the mode it just was in, which is consumption or, of course, drawing. Now, in terms of battery life, I mentioned you can charge this with a 65-watt Type-C charger, and it'll do the job, but you will not get full performance, nor will it charge as quickly. In order to do that, you're going to want to use their included 135-watt brick, which I have here, which is fairly large, about twice the size as the 65-watt, but there you're going to get the true quick charge capability, which again HP quotes at 50% in up to 30 minutes. A little over an hour is going to get you fully charged up, and if you want full performance, this is the way to go. So if you're doing any photo or video editing, rendering, you want to use the supplied 135-watt power adapter. No question about that. Now, in terms of I/O, that's another thing I want to address, because this is a two-in-one that acts as a desktop replacement. And if this is going to be your primary all-in-one machine, which I think it's incredibly competent and capable of being, you have to be aware of what's on board. So let's take a quick look. I'll flip it again. And we'll start with the left side of the machine, which you can see right there. We've got a full-size HDMI 2.0, I believe it's B. So, I mean, if you were looking for 2.1, you're not finding that on this generation of machine, but completely capable. Right next to it is the actual port for charging with that 135-watt adapter, 3.5mm headphone jack, microphone jack combo, ventilation. Then we go to the other side of the machine, and we've got two Type-C ports here, but only one of them is a Thunderbolt 3 port. Be aware of that. Then a Type-A port. The Type-A and the Type-C that are not Thunderbolt are still completely competent. They're just not Thunderbolt 3 ports. So be aware. You know, some machines have two ports capable of the 40, some don't. In this case, you've got one 40 lane, and then you've got two 10s. So just be aware. And then more ventilation here, and then a micro SD card slot right there. I wish we had a full-size SD card slot. I don't know why really no one except for Vio does this anymore. I mean, there are a few other fringe manufacturers. I think MSI, there are a few out there, but I wouldn't buy those, so that's an issue. In terms of heat and battery life, that's another thing I know a lot of you are going to be wondering about. So battery life is actually, I was impressed. I wasn't expecting with this 15.6-inch 4K AMOLED to get great battery life, but I legitimately got anywhere from 5 to 7 hours depending on my usage. So that is really impressive for a desktop replacement with all of this hardware, a dedicated GPU that can game, can really cut down render times. Again, depending on the software you use, I was using Vegas, but the same would apply to Adobe Premiere. So that's pretty promising in my opinion. Would I like to see a battery that could go the distance even beyond that? Sure. But is that realistic? Not so much. Not at least right now. Maybe with Tiger Lake. But again, I don't know if it's 350 or 400 nit brightness that you have here, which right now I don't have all the way up. If I take it all the way up, it was close to all the way up. You can see, and then how dark you can get going to the lowest level. The AMOLED is just beautiful. I mean, it's the star of the show. Don't get me wrong. The CPU is great. Again, that's not Tiger Lake great, but it's great for here in 2020, even if it's not a leap from the previous gen. And the GPU, it's been around the block, so it's not fresh, brand spanking new, but totally competent and capable for, I think, anything that anybody would plan on doing with this machine. So we've gone over display performance. The pen, the inking experience is solid. I would say it's about as good as it gets in the PC realm. Pretty much the same as my experience with the 13T, but I think a little bit better just because of the extra horsepower. That always is going to help. Headroom with the actual internal processing power is going to benefit you there. Keyboard is great. The dedicated kill switch I didn't mention, which is right next to the Type A port. That is something that really I don't know how I bothered with laptops before that existed. I mean, a lot of manufacturers just incorporate, like Lenovo, and it's not a knock against them, just a little switch that you flip and it just covers it. This actually kills the power to it. I like HP's approach here. It's smart. It's what manufacturers should be doing more of, just like the mute buttons for the microphone and speakers having an LED notification light. I mean, I think that's just a no-brainer. I mentioned these feet are going to prevent the keyboard from getting scratched. They're also going to prevent the screen from getting scratched or imprints from the keys themselves. Now, when it comes to how hot this machine gets over that 5 to 7 hours of battery life, it can get pretty toasty. And that is another thing it shares in common with the 13T. I was hoping that wouldn't be the case. It doesn't get very loud through the course of this video. I know I haven't been doing anything, but a lot of people complain with the Lenovo C940 convertible that fans would kick up when you were doing nothing. And that did happen on occasion. Not a lot for me. I don't really see any of that here, which is promising. I think that's a good thing. And I have been using this again as a daily driver workhorse for, I don't know if it's a month, but it's right around there, somewhere around there. So that says a lot. But when you are putting it through the paces, when you are gaming at 1080p, when you are rendering video or doing photo editing, you are going to see this machine get hot. Hot enough that you do not want it on your lap. And even though the ventilation is all pretty much on the side, I do not recommend having it on any sort of surface that could in any way block ventilation. I mean, that applies to any machine on Earth, so that's not unique to this one, but something you need to be aware of. And, Tiger Lake shows a very big leap in performance from what we've got here. But remember, the 14-inch Spectre that was just revealed, and I'm glad that I waited to do the full review, because had I done it and then that had been revealed, I wouldn't be able to give you any insight on my thoughts with that. I think it's a really promising machine, and it's an in-between between this and the 13T. And both of these machines are going to see Tiger Lake eventually, although I know they said with the 13T it'll be first quarter of 2021. So, I mean, that's not that far away, right? Whereas the Spectre 14 is going to launch before the end of the year. But remember, as I mentioned, that machine is not going to have a dedicated GPU. That machine is not going to have a 4K resolution. So if you prefer if you don't care about the GPU and you don't care about having a 4K 16:9 aspect ratio, which is a matter of personal preference, then that might be the machine that's worth waiting for. It's about to launch. I'm sure there are going to be inventory issues with it too, because this thing has been selling out for a reason. There is no other machine. I mean, I'm waiting for a Lenovo refresh, and it's coming, but there is no machine that directly competes with this, in my opinion, between the display, processor, GPU, the actual weight of it, battery life. I mean, it just checks every box. And frankly, had it been available when I was shopping laptops at the end of 2019, I probably would have gone with this. But I don't have regrets, because the 13T still can go places, even though we're in a pandemic and I'm not traveling. And that's why I said I probably would have gone with this. Is if I knew we were all going to be trapped in this bit of COVID hell, then, you know, portability would not have been as important to me, and I would have liked the versatility of the extra horsepower both on the CPU and GPU side. And when it comes to connectivity, you know, Intel Wi-Fi 6 chipset on board is best in class. It's the standard right now. Bluetooth connectivity has also been great. So no real complaints. I mean, at the end of the day, the only thing that I can tell you is an issue or are issues with this machine. Again, audio performance I wish was better. Wish we had a better webcam, especially in a pandemic, which I'm sure HP, I hope they're addressing in the 14-inch and future refreshes of the Spectre lineup. And then, you know, people can argue that the trackpad is too small, but that's pretty much it. And I don't have a problem with the trackpad. The audio, again, I wish was a little bit better, because when you have such a gorgeous 15.6-inch AMOLED with true color accuracy like this, it's something to behold. And if you're a content creator like myself, or you do any form of color proofing, this is a phenomenal display to have. If you don't do any of those things, it's still phenomenal, and it makes everything else look like trash. So these are things you need to be aware of. As I mentioned, gaming on this, it is not a gaming laptop with this GPU, but it's certainly capable enough that you can game. Would I ever choose this for gaming? No, but if I was traveling with it, it would be fine. Whereas my 13T, it can game, but rudimentary. You know, you're talking about being able to run things versus not. Here, you actually could run things at 1080p and get decent frames depending on the game and its settings. So I could have, you know, thrown Cinebench and all sorts of benchmarks at you. Crystal Disk on the 1 terabyte Intel NVMe. That's all a load of crap at the end of the day. It comes down to real world experience. And my real world experience with this has been great. And I do recommend, you know, instead of upgrading the internal NVMe drive, go out and get yourself a portable one. Yeah, they're expensive, but they're all different price points, whether you go with Sabrent or you get something that's a little bit slower, that's not Thunderbolt 3 capable, like the old SanDisk. These will be completely competent and solve your internal storage problems. And I don't think it's worth, for most of you out there, I'm not putting myself in that same group, but for most of you, I don't think it's worth the extra money to invest in upgrading the internal NVMe drive, at least through HP. If you want to do that on your own, that's a completely different story. You might have an NVMe sitting and waiting, so that's a totally different story. Of course, you know, traditional content consumption on here is going to be easy peasy. You're not going to, this machine is not going to sweat. It's a beast of a 4.23 or 4.24, whatever it is, pound machine. And again, I'm sad to see it go, because the fit and finish on it, the build quality, the display, they're all great. And we've come a long way here in 2020. It's been a real crappy year, but I have to say, when it comes to tech, it's been a real solid one. And HP has done a great job with this refresh. Again, I wish it had come out last year, but it's here now. And if you can find it in stock and you're wondering whether it's worth the money, it is. And as I've said, waiting for the Tiger Lake refresh, it's one of those things where that's going to be sometime next year, because, you know, this has been out for several months, but it hasn't been out a year. So keep that in mind. And you're not going to see a refresh so quickly. And Tiger Lake does show a tremendous amount of promise. So I'm all for it. I'm very excited about what we're going to see in the 13T and the 14. But the truth is that if you're always waiting for the next latest and greatest, you'll always be waiting. So if you need something now and you can get this in stock, you will not be disappointed with this, in my opinion. It pretty much checks every single box. I've told you the weak points. It does get pretty hot when it's under load. I didn't really notice any true throttling or performance issues. Hibernation, some bugginess here and there, but you know, there are updates fairly regularly from HP to address those things, and I haven't been having problems with that. You know, out of the box initially, some issues, but I feel like that happens with every manufacturer. And again, that 14-inch version that was just announced, it doesn't, for me, it doesn't feel like it directly competes with this, since it doesn't have a 4K display, the 3:2 aspect ratios for a different customer than myself personally, and in addition to that, no GPU option. So I don't see that as a direct competitor at all. Remember, this does not come with a pen, So if you plan on utilizing pen input, you're going to have to purchase that separately. You can bundle it on HP's website. I do recommend the tilt pen over the regular one, only because I prefer not having to rely on quadruple A batteries. So keep that in mind. And then just for, a point of reference, here is the 13T seated on top of the 15T, and you start to get an idea, a little bit of dust there, of the footprint difference. And that's one of the reasons I still love the 13T, is that this can fit in places that, the 15 just isn't going to make it. Like in camera bags I have that were originally designed for tablets only, this can actually make it, which is amazing. But, it's not the machine this is. No question about it. Are they separate? Are they worlds apart? No, they are not. When it comes to battery life, they're not worlds apart. Processor, not worlds apart. But at any rate, that's a different video. That's not today's. That'll be a much shorter comparison than this in-depth full review look at this. And before I wrap it up, one other thing that I would be remiss not to share is the carry case, which is essentially the same one that came with the 13T. HP's been bundling these now for a while. Faux leather, does the job. You want something that's going to protect the machine and just give you the ability to, keep it, slim and as light as you possibly can. And that's exactly what this case does. And then in addition to that, you have the ability right here to pocket your pen of choice, and you're good to go. And that's it. And folks, that is the HP Spectre X360 15T for 2020. I highly recommend it. If you're on the fence, get off. This is, in my opinion, as I stated at the top of the video, the best 2-in-1 of its kind on the market right now. And of course, it will improve like every Spectre model has. But if you're looking for the best option right now, you will not be disappointed with this machine. As I said, I am sad to see it go because I have used it as a workhorse, and I have my desktop, so I don't need a desktop replacement, but a lot of you do. And if that's what you're looking for, this is going to do the trick without breaking the bank. Because even though it's almost $2,000 after tax, God knows desktop replacements go much higher than that, especially if you turn to manufacturers that will rip you off. And I don't feel HP does. I don't feel Lenovo does, but some companies that will remain unnamed like to charge insane prices for underpowered equipment. Any questions or comments, please feel free to post them. Hit that like button. And as usual, please feel free to subscribe, and please stay safe. Later.